do you recommend PHP WordPress or PHP October CMS? Okay, so PHP WordPress or PHP October CMS. It really depends on what it is that you wish to do. The thing with WordPress is that clients love it. They absolutely adore it because it's so easy for them to use. It's full of WYSIWYG editors that you can go from one company to another company and you just know it, right? So clients that I've had, they have people that come in to do content, to do copy using WordPress. That's one of the first questions they ask is, do you know WordPress? Yes, good, okay. October CMS, Concrete 5, there's loads of other ones. They are great. However, they have their own way of doing things. They have their own way of creating blocks and pages and plugins and all of that kind of stuff. WordPress being the sort of de facto content management system for microsites, it seems, from my perspective, from my point of view, from my experience with working with clients that have lots of micro sites, they tend to use WordPress simply because they can get WordPress, they can get people quicker on board because they know WordPress. Now that certainly doesn't talk about the technical sides of WordPress or October CMS or Concrete 5 or any kind of bespoke thing at all. That is just from the point of view of getting bums on seats to actually write your copy. If you have to train someone up in order to do bits and pieces on an application, to create a menu, to create a page, to create a blog post, to create an article, then that becomes a barrier. And because WordPress is this, as I said, the de facto standard, because there's so many, it's just easy to install, it's easy to use. You're constantly fighting that struggle. The thing is, WordPress, I mean, I've created lots of WordPress sites and I've created lots of WordPress plugins as well. I don't necessarily like WordPress. I'm not the biggest fan of WordPress. It's not coded in a way that I particularly enjoy to work with. So there is that. There is a bit of a pushback from developers who use WordPress that I know of, because they have to adhere to the WordPress way. So the massive loops and the crazy naming conventions and the database is not configured in a way that seems very logical. Personally, I tend to use a lot of bespoke stuff. I'm at the moment a Symfony and Laravel developer. I do a lot of Symfony work. I do a lot of Laravel work. Luckily, Symfony and Laravel they're quite similar. They're quite similar. In fact, Laravel uses a lot of components of Symfony because Symfony has modularized itself. So the way in which perhaps the requests and the responses are handled in the controller of Laravel is much similar, very similar to the way it's done in Symfony, because it's using the Symfony components of Laravel. For a developer, just check out the composer.json file and see all of the stuff that Laravel has to include to actually get Laravel installed, and then compare that to all of the stuff in Symfony to get Symfony installed. Essentially, what these frameworks differ is the sugar on top, the stuff that is on top, the stuff that handles the responses and the requests, that handles the communication between the services, and so forth. But the actual grunt work, the real nitty-gritty foundations, They are very standardized these days, and you have these things like the PSR standards that these frameworks are adhering to and following, because standards are good and standards make more contribution, because when you're following a standard, you're following the same standard that everyone else is following, and therefore it's easier to work with and easier to maintain. Going back to the refactoring there, and when you're dealing with that, it's very easy to switch from one to the two. There's also Concrete 5. Concrete 5 is like the way of it's very similar to WordPress in the sense that it's very WYSIWYG editor. It's a content management system after all, but it's built on a lot of the Symfony components. So I think really there is the I think the argument is which, from a point of view of what developer would you be, a October CMS guy or a Concrete 5 guy? It's take away all the fluff, take away all the stuff that you have to go through in order to create a page, create a menu, and all of that stuff. None of that matters from a developer's point of view. It's all about what are the components that are being used, what's the framework underneath, what is the what are the libraries that are in use, how easy it is for me to add a plugin to this thing. And one thing that crops up hugely is how much of a roadmap do I know right now? Because there is so many times where I've just heard clients or developers of clients go, yeah, we tried to do this, but then they updated their application and we weren't aware that they updated their application, and so we can't do this anymore because we've had to do this in a completely different fashion, a completely different way, and it's broken the stuff that we tried to do bespokely earlier. Now, there's been a lot of times where I've actually taken a WordPress site and I've turned it into either Laravel or Symfony, because the things that the clients were asking and the roadmap of the client just didn't feel right with the frameworks, with the content management system. You are giving over a lot of control to the maintainers and developers of those things. And so if they change the way a plugin works, then you as a developer have to maintain that and change that and work with that and run with that. And so you are giving a lot of your control over. And there's been lots of times where, especially with WordPress is just so, I just think it's just the way in which you can allow a client to update WordPress by pulling down a zip file or a compressed file and then updating the data. That's just dangerous. That is just so dangerous. So that gets turned off. If they need to update WordPress, they come to the developer. They don't just update it on themselves, because as soon as you start writing custom code, then you need to ensure that that custom code that you've created still works with the updates. And because you're not aware of the updates coming through, yes, you might be able to go through and read the roadmap and so on and so forth. But really, you want to be in control of that. So as a developer, I really do ask the clients, what is their roadmap? Because you don't want to, if, for example, one year they want to have a blog and the next year they want to have an e-commerce shopping cart, and then the following year they want to have a stock management system, and then the following year they want something else and they want something else. You need to make sure that whatever foundation work that you're putting down now allows you to do those kind of things. I've now just turned that question into a massive rant, and I do apologize. And I don't think I've actually answered it. What do you recommend, PHP WordPress or PHP October CMS? it's very tricky to say what I recommend.